Saturday evening felt unusually quiet. The entire house seemed empty without the normal background noise of family conversations, television sounds, or people moving between rooms. Soft orange sunset light entered through the living room windows while Ryan sat alone on the couch, scrolling aimlessly through social media. Outside, Houston streets slowly disappeared beneath the calm evening sky while distant traffic echoed faintly through the neighborhood. Ryan sighed and tossed his phone beside him. Boredom was starting to feel physically painful at this point. Then suddenly his phone vibrated loudly across the couch. Ethan calling. Ryan answered immediately. "You alive?" Ethan's voice asked casually from the other side. "Barely," Ryan muttered dramatically. Ethan laughed. "What are you doing?" "Nothing. Dying slowly." "Good," Ethan replied. "Because I'm nearby." Ryan sat up slightly. "Nearby where?" "Like 5 minutes away." Ryan frowned slightly in confusion. "Okay." Ethan hesitated for a second before continuing. "I'm with somebody, though." Ryan immediately became curious. "With who?" "A friend." "What kind of friend?" Ethan laughed again. "Relax. You like him." Ryan rolled his eyes, even though Ethan couldn't see him. Then Ethan casually asked, "Anybody home?" Ryan glanced around the quiet house before answering. "Nope. Completely alone." "Perfect." Ryan blinked once. "Perfect sounds suspicious." "It's not suspicious. That's exactly what suspicious people say." Ethan ignored the comment completely. "So, can we come over or not?" Ryan smirked slightly while standing up from the couch. "Yeah, come." "All right. We'll be there soon." The call ended. Ryan stared at the screen for a second before suddenly realizing his house looked terrible. Oh no. Within minutes, he started cleaning everything at maximum speed. Blankets were thrown onto chairs. Empty snack wrappers disappeared into trash bags. Random clothes vanished from the living room floor. Ryan even sprayed air freshener around the house like somebody preparing for a celebrity interview. Halfway through cleaning, he stopped suddenly and looked at himself in the hallway mirror. "You're doing too much," he muttered quietly. Still, he changed clothes anyway, just in case. About 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Ryan took one deep breath before opening the front door. Ethan stood there, smiling casually beneath the porch light. Beside him stood someone Ryan had never seen before. And honestly, the guy was ridiculously attractive. Tall, dark hair, slightly messy from the evening wind. Confident posture, sharp jawline, calm eyes. The stranger looked relaxed while casually adjusting the sleeves of his black hoodie. For one awkward second, Ryan completely forgot how conversations worked. Ethan noticed immediately and smirked. "You gonna let us in or just stare emotionally?" Ryan snapped back to reality. "Right. Yeah. Sorry." The two walked inside, while Ryan quietly tried pretending he wasn't suddenly nervous for absolutely no reason. Ethan tossed himself dramatically onto the couch. "This place somehow looks cleaner every time I visit." Ryan narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "Don't ruin this for me." The new guy laughed softly for the first time. The sound immediately caught Ryan's attention. Ethan pointed toward him casually. "This is Mason." Mason nodded slightly. "Nice to meet you." Ryan shook his hand briefly. "You too." For some reason, even that tiny interaction felt strangely noticeable. Mason's calm confidence made the entire room feel different somehow. Not arrogant, just comfortable, natural. Within minutes, the three of them settled into easy conversation like they already knew each other. Music played softly from the TV, while Ethan opened snacks from the kitchen and started talking endlessly about random college drama. Ryan noticed quickly that Mason wasn't as loud as Ethan. He listened more than he spoke. But whenever he did talk, Ryan found himself paying attention immediately. At one point, Ethan disappeared into the kitchen searching for drinks, leaving Ryan and Mason alone briefly in the living room. A short silence settled between them. Not awkward exactly, just new. Mason glanced around the house before speaking casually. "So you and Ethan been friends long?" Ryan nodded slightly. "Since high school." Mason smiled faintly. "That explains the chaos." Ryan laughed quietly. "Trust me, he's worse in public." "I believe it." The conversation became easier after that. Ryan slowly relaxed while talking to him. Mason had a calm personality that somehow made everything feel comfortable within minutes. They talked about movies, music, college life, late-night drives around the city, and terrible fast food places nearby. Every once in a while, Ryan caught himself noticing small things unintentionally. The way Mason smiled during conversations, the softness in his voice, the confidence in his eye contact. And somehow, despite only meeting him less than an hour ago, Ryan already felt strangely drawn toward him. Eventually, Ethan returned carrying drinks and immediately looked between them suspiciously. "You two bonding emotionally already?" Ryan threw a pillow at him instantly. "Shut up." Mason laughed quietly beside him. The evening slowly became warmer after that. Rain clouds gathered faintly outside while soft yellow lights filled the living room with a calm, relaxed atmosphere. At some point, they ordered food, watched random videos, and argued about music for nearly 30 minutes straight. Ryan couldn't remember the last time the house felt this alive. Normally, being alone at home made everything feel empty and boring. Tonight felt completely different, and the more time passed, the more Ryan realized something important. This wasn't just another random evening anymore. Somewhere between laughter, eye contact, quiet conversations, and comfortable silence, the night had already started becoming unforgettable. The night continued far longer than Ryan expected. Rain started falling softly outside, while warm yellow lights filled the living room with a calm atmosphere. Music played quietly in the background as empty snack bags and soda cans slowly covered the coffee table. Ethan remained his usual chaotic self for most of the evening, constantly making jokes, changing songs every 30 seconds, and telling embarrassing stories nobody asked to hear. Mason mostly laughed quietly beside him, but every once in a while Ryan caught Mason looking toward him during conversations. Not awkwardly, just attentively, like he genuinely listened whenever Ryan spoke. And somehow that simple thing became strangely noticeable. At around midnight, Ethan suddenly stood from the couch dramatically. "I'm starving again." Ryan looked confused. "You literally ate an hour ago." That was emotionally, not spiritually. Ryan threw another pillow at him, while Mason laughed softly nearby. Ethan grabbed his car keys from the table afterward. "I'm going to grab food from the gas station." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Right now?" "Yes." "You're insane. I've accepted that already." Then Ethan suddenly looked toward Mason. "You coming?" Mason shook his head casually. "Nah, I'm good." Ethan smirked suspiciously for a second while looking between both of them. Ryan immediately narrowed his eyes. "Don't." Ethan grinned wider. "Oh, I'm definitely leaving now." Before Ryan could insult him properly, Ethan disappeared out the front door, laughing to himself. A few seconds later, silence settled across the house. For the first time all night, Ryan and Mason were completely alone together. The atmosphere immediately felt different. Not uncomfortable, just quieter now, more personal somehow. Rain tapped gently against the living room windows while soft music continued playing in the background. Ryan leaned back against the couch, trying to act normal. "So," he muttered casually, "sorry about Ethan." Mason smiled faintly. "Honestly, I think he's entertaining. That makes one of us." Mason laughed quietly again. For a moment, neither spoke afterward. Ryan suddenly became painfully aware of everything around him. The sound of rain outside, the closeness between them on the couch, even the soft lamplight reflecting across Mason's face. Trying to distract himself, Ryan stood up. "You want something to drink?" "Sure." A few minutes later, they stood side by side in the kitchen while Ryan searched through the fridge. "You always this quiet?" Ryan asked casually. Mason leaned lightly against the counter. "Only around people I don't know well." Ryan handed him a soda can. "You seemed pretty confident earlier." Mason smirked slightly. "That's called pretending." The honesty in his voice caught Ryan slightly off guard. Mason opened the soda slowly before continuing quieter this time. "Most people think being confident means you're never nervous." He shrugged faintly. "Usually it just means you learn how to hide it better." Ryan studied him carefully. For the first time tonight, Mason looked less mysterious and more real somehow, more vulnerable beneath the calm personality. Ryan leaned back against the counter beside him. I think everybody does that. Probably. The conversation became easier after that. Without Ethan around, interrupting every 30 seconds, they naturally started talking about deeper things. College stress, family expectations, relationships that ended badly. The pressure of pretending life felt completely fine all the time. Ryan found himself opening up more than expected. Normally, he kept most emotions private, even around close friends. But talking to Mason felt strangely easy, comfortable. At one point, Mason looked toward him thoughtfully. "You seem quieter than most people." Ryan laughed softly. "That's a polite way of calling me socially awkward." "No," Mason smiled faintly. "You just pay attention more." The comment somehow stayed in Ryan's chest longer than expected. Outside, rain continued falling heavier now, while distant thunder echoed softly through the city. The house itself felt calm and isolated from the rest of the world. Eventually, the two returned upstairs to Ryan's room to watch another movie. Only this time, the atmosphere felt completely different from earlier. Less casual, more emotionally aware. Ryan sat near the headboard while Mason stretched comfortably across the bed beside him, both half watching the movie while continuing conversations over the dialogue anyway. At some point, their shoulders brushed accidentally. Neither moved away immediately. Ryan's heartbeat sped up slightly before he forced himself to focus back on the TV screen. Mason noticed. Ryan could tell from the faint smile that appeared on his face afterward. "You okay?" Mason asked quietly. Ryan cleared his throat awkwardly. "Yeah." "You looked nervous suddenly." "I'm always nervous." "That's reassuring." Ryan laughed softly despite himself. The tension between them slowly became impossible to ignore now. Not physical exactly. Emotional. Like both of them suddenly understood the atmosphere changing, but neither fully knew what to do about it yet. The movie eventually ended sometime after 1 a.m., but neither bothered choosing another one. Instead, they stayed talking in the dim room while rain continued outside. Mason leaned back against the wall quietly. "You know something weird?" he asked. "What?" "This is probably the most relaxed I've felt in months." Ryan looked toward him carefully. Mason stared down at his hands for a second before continuing. "Most people exhaust me honestly." He laughed weakly. "They always expect you to act like a certain version of yourself." Ryan nodded slowly. "I get that." Mason glanced toward him again. "But tonight doesn't feel like that." The honesty in his voice made Ryan's chest tighten softly, because deep down, he felt exactly the same way. The room fell quiet afterward. Not awkward. Just emotionally honest now. Rainwater rolled down the bedroom windows while distant thunder faded further away. Ryan noticed how calm Mason looked sitting beside him beneath the soft lamplight. The sharp confidence Ryan noticed earlier was still there. But now Ryan also noticed the loneliness hidden underneath it too, and somehow that made him feel even closer to him. Eventually Mason smiled faintly. "You know," he admitted quietly, "I almost didn't come tonight." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Mason shrugged lightly. "I don't usually go to random people's houses." Ryan smirked slightly. "Wow, I feel special." "You should." The next morning felt completely different. Sunlight entered softly through the bedroom curtains while distant traffic echoed outside the quiet neighborhood. For a few seconds, Ryan stayed, lying on the bed staring toward the ceiling, trying to process why his chest suddenly felt so heavy. Then he remembered everything. The rainstorm, the candlelight conversations, the way Mason looked at him before leaving late at night. Ryan slowly grabbed his phone from beside the pillow. No messages. For some reason, that disappointed him more than expected. He tossed the phone back onto the bed and rubbed his face tiredly. "You're overthinking already," he muttered quietly to himself. But deep down he knew the truth. Something about last night affected him emotionally in ways he wasn't ready to admit yet. Later that afternoon, Ethan called him again. "So," Ethan said immediately, "you and Mason emotionally married now, or what?" Ryan nearly choked on his drink. "What is wrong with you?" Ethan laughed loudly. "I'm serious. Dude wouldn't stop talking about you after we left." Ryan froze, slightly hearing that. "What did he say?" "Relax," Ethan replied dramatically. "Nothing embarrassing." "That's not an answer." Ethan ignored him completely. "All I'm saying is, I don't think Mason expected to like you that much. Ryan stayed quiet for a second. Hearing those words should have made him feel relieved. Instead, somehow, they made him more nervous, because now everything felt real. The emotional connection from that night wasn't something he imagined alone, and suddenly that realization became terrifying. Over the next few days, Ryan found himself thinking about Mason constantly. Random conversations replayed inside his mind during classes, late-night music, even simple moments like standing in grocery store lines or driving through traffic. The problem wasn't just attraction anymore. It was emotional attachment, and Ryan hadn't allowed himself to feel that close to someone in a very long time. At first, Mason continued texting normally. Funny memes, random music recommendations, late-night conversations about movies and life. Sometimes they stayed awake, messaging each other until nearly sunrise. And every conversation somehow made Ryan feel closer to him. But then slowly, things started changing. Mason became quieter. Replies took longer. Some messages felt shorter than usual. At first, Ryan tried ignoring it. People get busy. People have lives. Still, the emotional distance became impossible not to notice eventually. One Thursday night, Ryan sat alone in his room, staring at his phone, while rain tapped softly against the windows again. Their conversation had completely died halfway through the evening. Ryan typed 3 different replies before deleting all of them. Finally, he tossed the phone onto the bed in frustration. What am I even doing? Part of him wanted to message Mason honestly and ask what changed. Another part feared the answer too much, because deep down Ryan already knew something felt wrong. The next day, Ethan accidentally confirmed it. The two sat outside a coffee shop after class while cars moved slowly through wet downtown streets nearby. Ethan sipped his drink casually before muttering, "Mason's been weird lately." Ryan immediately looked up. "Weird how?" Ethan shrugged. "Quiet. Distracted." He hesitated briefly before continuing softer. "Honestly, I think he's overthinking everything." Ryan's stomach tightened slightly. Did he say something? Ethan glanced toward him carefully. "He likes you, Ryan." The sentence landed heavily between them. "But," Ryan asked quietly. Ethan sighed. "But Mason's also terrified of emotional attachment." Ryan looked away toward the rainy street outside. For some reason, hearing that hurt more than he expected, because suddenly everything made sense. The distance, the hesitation, the mixed signals. Mason wasn't pulling away because the connection meant nothing. He was pulling away because it meant too much. Still, understanding the reason didn't make the loneliness easier. Over the next week, the emotional confusion between them slowly grew worse. Some nights, Mason texted normally again, making Ryan feel hopeful. Other times, he disappeared emotionally without explanation for hours or entire days. Ryan started questioning himself constantly afterward. Maybe he became attached too quickly. Maybe he misunderstood the connection completely. Maybe Mason regretted opening up emotionally that night. The overthinking slowly exhausted him. One evening, Ryan finally sent a simple message. "Did I do something wrong?" The typing bubble appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then returned again. Finally, Mason replied, "No, you didn't." Ryan stared at the screen, waiting for more. Nothing came. The silence afterwards somehow felt worse than any argument could have been. 3 full days passed after that without hearing from him. No calls, no texts, nothing. Ryan tried distracting himself with music, gaming, movies, even going out with friends, but none of it worked properly. Everything kept reminding him of Mason somehow, especially nights. Nights became the worst part, because every quiet moment gave his thoughts space to spiral further. At nearly midnight on the 3rd night, Ryan sat alone on the living room floor while soft music played through the dark house around him. Rain fell outside again, almost identical to the night Mason first came over. Ryan laughed bitterly under his breath. Of course it was raining. His phone suddenly lit up beside him. Mason calling. Ryan stared at the screen for 2 full seconds before answering. "Hello." For a moment, Mason stayed silent on the other side. Then finally he spoke quietly. "I'm sorry." Ryan closed his eyes briefly, hearing his voice again. Part of him wanted to sound angry. Instead, he only sounded tired. You disappeared. I know. Ryan leaned back against the couch slowly. What happened? Mason exhaled heavily through the phone. I panicked. The honesty in his voice immediately softened something inside Ryan despite everything. Mason continued quietly. I'm not good at this. At what? Feeling close to somebody. Silence filled the space between them for several seconds. Ryan listened carefully while rain echoed softly outside the windows. Then Mason admitted something even quieter this time. You scare me a little. Ryan frowned slightly. Why? Because I can't stop thinking about you. The sentence completely stole the air from Ryan's chest. Mason laughed weakly afterward. See? That sounds insane. No, Ryan answered softly. It doesn't. The following evening felt calmer somehow. Not because the confusion completely disappeared, but because for the first time, both Ryan and Mason had finally stopped pretending their connection meant nothing. Rain still covered parts of Houston, while city lights reflected softly across wet streets outside Ryan's bedroom window. He sat on the edge of the bed staring at his phone after the late-night call ended, replaying Mason's words over and over inside his head. You scare me a little. Ryan smiled faintly to himself. Not because the situation felt simple now, because it finally felt honest. The next morning, Mason texted him first. Can we meet today? Ryan stared at the message for a second before replying. Yeah. A few hours later, they met at a quiet rooftop cafe overlooking downtown Houston. The evening sky glowed orange and purple above the city, while soft music played around the nearly empty rooftop seating area. Cars moved slowly below them through rain-covered streets as cool wind passed gently across the open space. Ryan spotted Mason standing near the railing waiting for him. For a moment, neither moved. Neither fully knew how to start this conversation. Then Mason smiled weakly. Hi. Ryan walked closer slowly. Hi. The awkwardness between them lasted only a few seconds before both quietly laughed at the situation. Mason rubbed the back of his neck nervously. I practiced this conversation like 20 times in my head. Ryan smirked slightly. How'd that go? Terribly. That made Ryan laugh for real this time. And somehow hearing that laughter again instantly made everything feel lighter between them. They sat together near the edge of the rooftop while city lights slowly brightened beneath the darkening evening sky. For a while they talked casually at first. College stress, music, Ethan's terrible jokes, anything except the emotional tension both were trying to address. Eventually Mason sighed softly and leaned back in his chair. Okay, he muttered. I should probably stop avoiding the actual conversation. Ryan looked toward him quietly. Mason stayed silent for a moment before finally speaking honestly. I think I spent most of my life avoiding emotional attachment. The vulnerability in his voice immediately caught Ryan's attention. Mason stared out toward the city while continuing softly. Every time somebody started becoming important to me, I'd pull away before things got too serious. He laughed weakly under his breath. It always felt safer that way. Ryan listened carefully without interrupting. Mason glanced toward him again. But then you happened. The sentence settled quietly between them. Ryan's chest tightened softly hearing it. Mason smiled faintly. That night at your house, he shook his head slightly. I didn't expect to feel that comfortable around someone so quickly. Ryan admitted quietly. Me neither. For the first time since this emotional confusion began, neither of them looked afraid of the conversation anymore. Just honest. Mason rested his arms against the table while speaking more softly now. When I stopped replying this week, it wasn't because I regretted anything. Ryan nodded slowly. I figured. I was scared because I realized how much you started mattering to me. The sincerity in his eyes made it impossible for Ryan to doubt him anymore. All week he'd worried their connection only mattered to him. Now he finally understood Mason had been struggling with the exact same fear. Ryan smiled slightly. You know, you're really bad at handling emotions. Mason laughed quietly. I'm aware, but at least you came back. That answer made Mason's expression soften immediately. Yeah, he admitted quietly, because losing this felt worse than being scared. For a moment, neither spoke afterward. The rooftop lights glowed warmly around them while wind moved gently through the evening air. Then Ryan finally asked the question both had been avoiding. "So what happens now?" Mason thought quietly for several seconds before answering. "I don't think we need to label everything immediately." Ryan nodded once. "But I do know I don't want to pretend this connection isn't real anymore." The honesty in those words immediately settled something deep inside Ryan's chest. Because deep down, that was all he truly wanted too. Not perfection, not certainty, just honesty. Ryan leaned back slightly while looking toward the glowing skyline. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "A week ago, you were literally a stranger." Mason smiled faintly. "And now?" Ryan looked toward him carefully. "Now you're the person I can't stop thinking about." Mason laughed softly under his breath before shaking his head. "See? You say emotional things so casually." Ryan smirked. "Someone has to." The tension between them slowly disappeared after that. Not because life suddenly became simple, but because both of them finally chose openness instead of fear. They stayed on the rooftop for hours afterward talking about everything they avoided before. Future plans, insecurities, loneliness, relationships, and a strange way one unexpected night completely changed both their lives. At one point, Mason quietly admitted, "You know what scared me most this week?" Ryan raised an eyebrow slightly. "What?" "That you'd stop caring." Ryan's expression softened instantly. "I tried." Mason laughed quietly. "And?" Ryan shook his head slightly. "Didn't work." That answer made Mason smile in a way Ryan hadn't seen before. Not confident, not guarded, just genuinely happy. Later that night, they left the rooftop cafe together while rain lightly covered the streets again. The city around them glowed beneath reflections of headlights and neon signs, while cool wind passed softly between buildings. As they walked side by side toward Mason's car, Ryan realized something important. Sometimes the most meaningful connections arrive unexpectedly, through random phone calls, rainy nights, late conversations, and the courage to stop running from feelings that quietly become impossible to ignore. For the first time in days, neither of them felt confused anymore. Whatever this connection was becoming, they would face it honestly together now.